So there's so much misinformation around in terms of health and fitness, but the reality is that most of us know what we have to do in order to live a more healthy life. So today, what I want to do is give you a couple tips and a framework to think about how to better your wellness in all dimensions rather than just in one or two dimensions. The model that I want to cover today is from the American College of Sports Medicine, and the dimensions of this model are physical, social, emotional, spiritual, occupational, as well as intelligence or intellectual. So I'm gonna go through this framework one by one. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through what their definition of this dimension of wellness is, and then I'm gonna give you some examples of what it might look like if you're excelling or if you're not quite meeting the mark, and then a couple things to do with each dimension to make sure that you are on the right path. So the first dimension is going to be the physical dimension, and the ACSM defines this as the ability to carry out your daily activities with vigor and relative ease. So if you're doing well in this, you're probably in a good mood, you probably have great energy, and if you're not doing so well, you probably have aches, pains, fatigue, maybe you get sick, maybe you're low energy throughout the day. But there's a couple things you can do to change that. Now, there are a ton of different things that you can do to better your physical health. And so I really just want to cover one from each dimension that I think is the most important. And those dimensions are your nutrition, your sleep, and your physical wellness. So let's start off with sleep. One of the best things that you can do is put yourself in the right place at the right time doing something relaxing. So regardless of whether you're tired or not, maybe you find yourself meandering towards the bedroom at like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whatever time it is that you're gonna go to bed, and then start a relaxing activity before you're actually going to go to bed so that you can have the time to wind down rather than looking at screens or doom scrolling or something like that. When it comes to nutrition, since it's such a nuanced topic, I want to just start with one simple thing, and that is make a good decision that is in alignment with your goals early on in the day. So if you're intermittent fasting, maybe it's skipping breakfast. Maybe if your goal is to build muscle, then you make sure that your breakfast has 30 grams of protein in it. Or maybe if you're not following any program, then you make sure that you get a whole food or something like a fruit or yogurt or something that's easy to digest that is going to put you on the right path. So my third tip around physical wellness is going to be to get some kind of movement in. It doesn't need to be crazy. Maybe it's just waking up, doing a set of push-ups, some squats, or even 5 to 10 minutes of gentle stretching on the floor to get you feeling better before you start your day, rather than putting that off until the end of the day and just going through that whole day with a little bit of stiffness in you. Now, with me being a personal trainer, I would always recommend engaging in some kind of exercise program. It could be as low as 1 time a week if you're not exercising, or you could even go as high as 4 or 5 times a week. Just make sure that whatever goal you have, the exercise program that you pick is both entertaining to you as well as moves you towards that goal rather than away from it. So the next pillar of the model is emotional stability. This is defined as the ability to understand feelings, accept limitations, and then achieve stability within those feelings. If you're lower in emotional health, you might be experiencing things like being constantly stressed, maybe you're irritable, maybe you're a little bit sad more often than you would prefer to be. While on the other hand, if you're high in emotional stability, you might be unbothered by other people's negative emotions. You might find yourself communicating clearly in the midst of your own emotions. These are good traits to have, and it's something we would want to work on. And so these are a couple things that you can do to move towards that. So when it comes to tips for emotional stability, one of them that I would give, it would be to quit caffeine. And this applies a little bit more to people that deal with anxiety than somebody that's dealing with some kind of sadness or anger. Caffeine is a stimulant, and just like any other stimulant, if you take it, it's going to increase your nervous system activation. And so if you are already worked up, if you are already what we call psychologically aroused, then it's only going to push you higher and higher, and that is a bad thing in terms of your anxiety. So I would say tone it back a little bit on the caffeine if you haven't tried it, if you're a naturally anxious person. My second tip for emotional regulation would be around doing some kind of breath work. Now, there are physiological bases for these, involving the activation of the vagus nerve through our breathing patterns. And one of the ways that I found this out was actually, I used to go to school in a very cold environment, and during the winter, I would try to make as big of vapor clouds as possible with my mouth. And so I found that it worked best if I held my breath for a long time, warmed up the air inside my lungs, and then I breathed it all out at one time. But what I was really doing was I was practicing taking long, slow, deep breaths with holds, and I noticed that I arrived at class in a very calm and neutral state. And so you don't necessarily have to do like some kind of monk breathing or some kind of crazy Wim Hof method, although I do enjoy exploring those and I would recommend just trying it if you haven't. It's a useful thing as long as you can stick to it, and if you can make it fun or find a way that it appeals to you, then trying and exploring breath work is definitely something I would recommend. So my third tip around emotional regulations is to tell somebody about your emotions. Sharing is something that lowers our negative emotions, and if you're not ready to share it with a person, then something like journaling, something like talking it over through a voice recording that you can listen back to, or not, just getting it out there, getting your feelings out is a good way to process those feelings and emotions. So when they come around the next time, they're not so sharp. The next pillar of the model is going to be your social wellness. So the ACSM defines this as the ability to relate well to others within and outside the family unit. This is all about your friends, your family, who you interact with. So what does this look like if it's low? You might feel isolated. You might feel like you don't have anybody to reach out to. You might feel like you're kind of the outcast, or you have difficulty trusting others. Maybe you tell yourself, hey, I don't like people. Well, that might be a sign that your social wellness is kind of on the wrong end of the spectrum. When it comes to what it looks like if you are doing well, maybe you feel like you have a lot of friends. You would rate yourself as having a lot of support. You have somebody that you can go to with any of your negative feelings. So what does it look like if it's high? Maybe you have friends that you can go to. So the first tip that I would give would be to reach out first. I used to not have a ton of friends or texts or responses or anything like that. And what I noticed is the second that I started to reach out to people, I got texts back. Maybe I didn't get a 100% response rate, but that's fine, because I was so focused on just sending information out that I started to get information back, but it took me starting rather than just expecting it from somebody else. Because how can I expect something from someone else that I don't already possess in myself or give to them? The second tip that I would say is, in social situations, it's easier just to ask questions and listen first, because everybody wants to tell you about something that's going on in their life. And I think we've got such a crisis of people that have so much to say, but nobody's feeling heard and nobody's listened. So the power of having a listening ear, being willing to take in what somebody's going through, and then when they feel that they have been heard, they're in a much better position to be able to listen to you. And then you can have a real conversation rather than just talking over each other. The third tip that I would give you regarding social health is to make a commitment. So that would be join a group of some kind. It could be something around fitness. It could be something around like board games. It could be a dance class. It doesn't have to be physical. It could be completely intellectual. Maybe you play video games with a group. Maybe you join a Discord server. Just something that puts you around other people, hopefully that are interested in something that you are interested in. And then you will find yourself in positions where you're able to ask questions, where you're able to listen, and then you're able to share and develop community and friendships. And then you'll see that social bar going up and up and up. And maybe you won't find yourself saying, you know what, I hate being around people. So the next pillar defined by the ACSM is the intellectual pillar. So what does your intellectual health look like? And they define this as the ability to learn and use information for personal development. So there's two parts to that. That is both learning and using or utilizing that information. So if you're doing this really well, you're probably already seeking new experiences. You're probably consuming things like books. You're probably looking for the value in all these new experiences. And on the other side, if you're not doing so well, you're probably consuming content that isn't really benefiting you. You may be consuming content that's good, but not acting on it. And you may also be experiencing the same problems over and over and over again. And that's that you're not learning from the mistakes that you've made in the past. My first tip regarding intellectual wellness would be read more books. It doesn't matter if it's a podcast, if it's an audiobook, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna quote Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones, and he says that my mind is a weapon, and a mind needs books like a sword needs a whetstone. And that's so true because you need to consume information to be able to learn new things and act differently in the world. So we need to make sure that the information that we are consuming is both productive and that we are acting on it. I also like to read real books before bed because then you're not messing with your circadian rhythm from all the light that's on your phones. My second tip for intellectual wellness would be to take up a new hobby of some kind or to add a constraint to an existing hobby. This will give you the opportunity to express more creativity in a way that you haven't before. So my third tip would be to get bored. So much of our creativity is stifled when we have this constant dopamine drip from technology and from immediate gratification. So set a time aside where you can get completely bored, where you can have time for these more creative activities, and it'll be grueling at the beginning, but I promise you, over time, you will begin to feel those creative juices flowing, and you'll find yourself doing activities that are truly rewarding rather than just in the moment. So the fifth pillar of this model is actually the spiritual pillar. Now, they define this as the ability to find meaning and purpose in life and circumstances. If you're feeling high in spiritual wellness, then you're probably feeling pretty convicted, like you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing, and you're acting in accordance with your values. On the other hand, if you're a little bit lower in spiritual wellness, maybe you're feeling a little bit lost, or maybe you're feeling some cognitive dissonance, like you're hanging out with people that are doing something that you don't necessarily want to do. My first tip regarding spiritual wellness would be to define the values that you want to live by. Now, some people find these values in religious texts, some people find them in stories that are told, or movies or shows that they've seen. Whatever your values are, maybe it's good to just jot 3 to 5 of those values down so that you know where you want to head. So my second tip for spiritual wellness is to do something for somebody else. We're looking for meaning in life and life circumstances and purpose. And one of the best ways that we can do that is to use our skills and our blessings to do something for somebody else. So give that a try. My third tip for spiritual wellness, and this goes along with the intellectual wellness, is to ask some kind of deep question. What is the purpose of life? Why would I want to do this? Why would I do something nice for somebody who's wronged me? And then look for the answer. And when you find the answer, you'll probably find a couple questions along the way. And so just continue that loop of asking questions and finding answers, and look through many different texts. If it's books, fine. If it's movies, good. Stay observant, stay vigilant, and continue to look for answers to life's big questions. The final pillar of wellness is occupational wellness. And the ACSM defines this as the ability to find personal satisfaction and enrichment through work. If you're doing well at this, then you probably wake up excited to go to work. You probably love working with the people that you're working with, and that your strengths are being utilized very well at work. If you're not doing so well, maybe you get the Sunday scaries before going to work on Monday. Maybe you're watching the clock all day and you're feeling dread and exhaustion at work and you just can't wait to leave and go home. My first tip for occupational wellness is to define how big of a role you want work to play. If you want work to play a big role in your life, then going for a high level of career achievement is probably a good thing. But if you don't want your life to be engulfed by work, then setting your goals to be a director or a executive is probably not going to be congruent with what you want to do in life. My second tip, and an extension of the first, is to find a mentor. Mentors are like time travelers. It's an opportunity to see what would happen if I lived the life that I'm thinking about living. And you can see this person that's maybe 20 years ahead of you in their career, and if their life looks desirable to you, then you can use them as a shortcut to get there. And if it looks undesirable, then you can say, I'm no longer going to go down that road. I'm going to choose a different path, and then find a different mentor that can help you do that. My final tip is going to be to use your vacation days. Vacation days help us regroup, recuperate, re-energize. They help us get back into using our fullest strengths at work. They also help us prevent burnout and from being miserable. There are so many good excuses to use vacation days. Please live your life outside of work. Continue to use those vacation days. If any of the 6 dimensions of wellness are out of place, then you won't be living your best life. If you learned anything pertaining to what I spoke about today, or you have any other questions, comment below. And as always, stay curious, stay active, and do something nice for somebody today. I'll see you in the next one.